Hey there, good Saturday afternoon. I am meteorologist Payton Malone. Tracking the tropics, things change very quickly in hurricane season, and wouldn't you know it, we have a named storm in the Gulf of Mexico as of Saturday afternoon here. Milton is the name of this storm in the far western Gulf here. You can see they're sitting just off the Mexican coast and many miles away from the northern Gulf and Florida. But what's interesting about Milton is the path of this thing, really the opposite path of what we normally see from a Gulf storm. Yes, this could end up being a significant storm. So if you were following us yesterday or earlier in this week, we were not really talking about anything like this, but now concern is growing and growing quickly for the state of Florida for a major hurricane to make landfall there by the middle of the week. Here we are, the cone showing Milton not moving very fast today or tomorrow, but starts to speed up into Monday. Into Monday, a hurricane. Tuesday, maybe a major hurricane, and then landfall somewhere on the west side of Florida. That's the peninsula of Florida by Wednesday as potentially a major hurricane. National Hurricane Center going with a Category 3 right now, but I will say there are some models that show this stronger up to a Category 4. So really can't overstate how bad of an impact this could be for the west side of Florida. It has been many years, maybe over 100 years, since the Tampa area has had a landfalling major storm coming up them with this trajectory right at the coastline. And it really can't be overstated the impacts this could bring to parts of Florida with storm surge and winds. So taking this very seriously for our friends over here. Now for Louisiana, this is going to stay to our south. Yeah, we'll have some breezy winds, but my concern level here, I don't have a concern with this in our local area. But Florida really starting to get concerned with this outlook. Why is it taking this odd path from west to east? Well, it's got a big trough of low pressure coming down. Now, typically in October, our atmosphere starts to get a bit more active with regard to the jet stream and troughs. We're cooling off, the atmosphere is shifting around, and you start to see these troughs dig down and weaken the ridge. So this trough coming down is why it's getting pulled that direction. We've got a cool front coming down by early next week. So that's why it's not coming due north here to Texas and Louisiana. That's why it's heading off to the east. And this fairly often happens in the latter part of hurricane season once we start to get our cool fronts and troughs of low pressure. So typically the ridge would be sitting about right in here, and that's what would steer it more northwest. But in this case, the complete opposite. And yes, it is going to be taking that interesting path right at Florida here. Our tropical models, they're in good agreement on the sense that it is heading west. They still don't agree exactly on intensity and exact timing. You can see there are quite a bit of a split. There's this cluster here and then a cluster down here, but generally the consensus is yes, the western side of Florida, but does it come north of Tampa, south of Tampa? That's going to have a big impact on just how high the surge gets in the Tampa Bay area and surrounding areas. Remember, if it goes in north of Tampa, worst case scenario for that area. And that area is extremely susceptible to storm surge, just like we are. It gets backed up in their bays, and many people alive have never seen an event like this if it does play out like this. So I'm not trying to sound dramatic here, but it really can't be overstated how bad of a type of path and intensity this could hold for those areas. And then it'll be out in the Atlantic by around Friday. So Wednesday is going to be the roughest day. Now, what's interesting about this is there's a precursor event, meaning there's going to be a lot of rain before the storm ever even gets to Florida. The next couple of days, rain's really going to be picking up. You can see all these showers and storms tied with an old frontal boundary across the Gulf. Watch all the rain through Sunday and Monday across the peninsula there. While Milton is still very far away, hundreds of miles away, the hurricane starts to get that core together. That's when it would likely start to rapidly intensify into Monday and Tuesday. And even by Monday, it's still nowhere near Florida, but they are getting some rain. So luckily for Florida, you do have several days to prepare for this. And, you know, right now you're still in that watch phase to see exactly what you need to be doing. But there are some things you could be doing right now in Florida to make sure you're not rushing at the end of this to get things done, because come Wednesday morning into Wednesday afternoon, conditions will go downhill rapidly, and you could very well have a major hurricane making landfall on the peninsula. Heavy rain already starting tomorrow. There'll be rounds of rain tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday. The worst of the hurricane, that's the surge and the winds, will be on Wednesday as the core of that storm moves inland somewhere on the west side of Florida. But this type of path would also bring wind impacts far inland. This would bring wind impacts to maybe Orlando with significant impacts, and depending on where that core travels. But remember, the peninsula of Florida is not very big, so that hurricane would likely stay quite strong far inland here, and even onto the Atlantic side, still have a hurricane at the end of the day. Now, what's interesting is the intensity of this will likely determine where exactly it wants to go. This type of tropical model I'm showing you It's great because it breaks down how the steering currents change based on the intensity of the storm. A more intense storm is going to have slightly different steering currents than a very weak system. In this case, what you're seeing here is in red. That's the strongest scenario. Let's say that's a Category 4 or so. The white line is the National Hurricane Center's forecast right now, and you can see they are along the lines of the more intense hurricane. The yellow line would probably be somewhere in middle, Category 1, Category 2, maybe even lower toward the tropical storm. And then the green line is this thing not really ever organizing. That does not seem very likely. So right now, the consensus is somewhere in between the yellow and the red here, right near Tampa is where they have it. But know that the intensity, a more intense hurricane could end up coming a little further north of Tampa. Maybe if it stays weaker, it comes a little further south. So that's one of those minor things that it's very hard to forecast. And you can't really forecast until you know what the intensity is. And intensity is the hardest thing to forecast with a hurricane. So remember, all these things work together, but we are thinking a western side of Florida landfall there by the time we get into Wednesday afternoon. So once again, can't be overstated. Tropical Storm Milton forecast to become a major hurricane. Milton make landfall in Florida by Wednesday as a major hurricane. That's Category 3 or higher. Now here locally, our forecast is looking great once again. You know, you've got a storm staying to our south. We've got a storm heading to Florida. That means we don't see any major impacts, just a little bit breezier. We've got a lot of festivals going on this weekend. Today has been pretty nice. Tomorrow looks nice too. I've got a 10% chance of a passing shower Sunday. For the most part, it'll be a mix of sun and clouds and breezy. And the next week, it is dry and warm in the 80s, but we get a cool front coming in behind Milton, and next week is going to be gorgeous here in southeast Louisiana and South Mississippi. Now, one impact if you live in coastal areas, east and northeast facing shorelines, tides are going to be persistently higher than normal the next several days into early next week. With a hurricane to our south, we will have some breezier winds, 15 to 20 miles an hour, so tides will be a couple of feet higher than normal. Those east facing shorelines in Hancock County, down into St. Tammany, the Wrigley's, there towards Venetian Isles, Lake Catherine, Shell Beach, and the Lake Bourne here. All those tides will be a couple feet higher than normal through early next week. And same thing for the East Bank side of Plaquemines Parish. Maybe down in Grand Isle on the back side of the island, their waters will be slightly higher than normal too. So here's a look at that 7-day forecast for southeast Louisiana and South Mississippi. We're thinking about our friends in Florida once again. Of course, this is the last thing anyone needs, especially after the impacts from Helene. Many areas are still very much in the thick of just cleaning up, getting water out of their homes, cleaning up debris still, and yes, a major hurricane coming their way. So for us, this week is completely quiet. Upcoming week is going to be warm in the 80s. Our week cool front knocks us from 87 to 84, so it's not going to be a strong cool front, but our mornings are really nice next week. We have some upper 50s as we get into the middle of next week. That would be on the North Shore, mainly north of I-12, and then the South Shore, I have us in some mid to upper 60s, so some lovely mornings on the way. Afternoons are going to be sunny and warm, and it does look like we're going to stay breezy. That is the latest update on Tropical Storm Milton and our local forecast. Thank you for joining me right here on WWL Plus and all of our other platforms. Your next forecast and track and intensity update with Milton will be at 10 o'clock.